Merry meet. I'm Aislin and this is Ask Aislin. Happy waning moon. Happy Black Cat Appreciation Day. For those who don't know, August 17th is Black Cat Appreciation Day. I'm actually here. It's this rare treat. One of my mini panthers, Camazotz, is here to join us. So I thought he would come on screen and say hi. I actually got found Cammy. He was found in a dumpster when he was only a couple days old, and he was bottle fed along with his sister. We bottle fed them. So Black Cat Appreciation Day is a little day. It was created by a man named Wayne Morris. He was trying to commemorate it was actually in honor of his sister when she passed away. She was a great lover of black cats, and so he created the day like in 2011, I think. And sadly, Wayne passed on, crossed through the veils a couple months ago. But if you have black cats or you love black cats, is a day to celebrate them and just cherish how special they are. They are the cat who is most likely to be euthanized in a shelter, the least likely to get adopted. So it's just really important that we have a day that kind of educates people and lets them know that they are just as special as other cats and there's nothing evil about them. So I'm going to jump in now. Tonight's episode is about the fire element and self-belief. But I always like to start off by talking just a bit about the moon phase that we're currently in. I'm just going to give a little bit of brief explanation about that. So as I mentioned, we're in the waning moon right now. This is the waning gibbous, and we will be entering third quarter moon tomorrow at about 9:36 p.m. tomorrow night on the west coast. So it'll be I think about like 12:30 a.m. the next day on the east coast. And the waning moon in general, we start to turn more inward, we become more contemplative. It's an excellent time to start shadow work, especially as we cross through the third quarter into the last 7 days of the cycle. Our dreams might be enhanced, our intuition enhanced. So it's just a really good time overall. Sometimes people feel more emotional. There can be a little bit more depression there. And so if you ever experience that, I definitely encourage you to kind of turn inward, find some real self-care practices. Take care of yourself during this time because there is a lot of heightened emotions. So I'm going to jump in now and we're going to get all into the fire element and self-belief. And if you are here live, if you've got any questions, you can always bring them up at the end or you can put them in the feed. The feed, I'll make sure I keep checking that. And let's get started. So the fire element, like all of the earthly elements, they are connected to a part of the body, or rather a part of our physical being. So the earth element is really connected to our physical body, especially our bones and our flesh. The water element is connected to our blood and the bodily fluids within us. The air element is connected to our breath, and the fire element is connected to our will. So we can be alive, right? We can be breathing and have blood pumping through our veins and, be alive, but not have a will. And so that's really what the fire gives us. It breathes that life, that creative spark into us. And then of course there's the element of spirit, which is like our soul or that thing that animates us. Now, in a pagan Western metaphysical system, this would be kind of the alignment of those elements and their associations. And we are going to return to that in just a moment, since we are generally studying the pagan, Western metaphysical system. But for a moment, I just wanted to pause and talk about how the fire element works within the chakra system. It's a little bit different there, though it has a lot of similarities. So in the chakra system, the solar plexus, which is not directly at the navel, it's about an inch or two above the navel. This is connected to the element of fire. And in Sanskrit, the word for the solar plexus is Manipura. It translates to lustrous gem or sometimes city of gems. I really love that translation of it. And it really speaks to the fact that the solar plexus, and therefore the element of fire, is of utmost importance, especially within the chakra system. In fact, there is the word for fire in Sanskrit is Agni, and the Agni is thought of as the life-giving force within us. And in some ways, it may even be considered the most important element within that system. So what this connects to is our digestion in particular and our internal fire. So when you're working in the kind of the Eastern chakra system, if a person has bad digestion, it's connected to having, low fire, and that internal fire is just not really burning correctly. So for this very reason, in Ayurveda, a lot of healing of ailments is done through food, correcting the digestion, making sure the person is eating the proper foods for their constitution. And that's well beyond the scope of tonight's episode, but I just wanted to bring that up. You can also work with the fire element through breath work and through kriyas, which are repetitive movements, and I will be talking about this a little bit later, and I'll actually be teaching you a breath that you can use to stimulate the fire within you, and I'll be speaking a little bit more about the kriyas as well. But I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to get back into the Western metaphysical system. There's Cami in the background. So in that system, the one that we're most familiar with, the element of fire it's our energy, it's our motivation, it's a dynamic force. But it can also have negative connotations with it as well, just like all the other elements. So it can be combative, it can be destructive, it can even be violent. So, when violence takes place, it's usually there's an overabundance of fire. Now, if we think about how people get when it gets hot, just think about it. So last summer, our air conditioning went out here, and it was not pleasant to be here. It went out when it was the hottest. I think it was like well over 100, like 110 here. It was insane. But you get agitated, and it's really hard to be pleasant with those around you, right? And so it's no surprise that agitation and, in fact, violence, violent crimes, murders, rapes, assaults, all of this rises in the summer. There's actually been studies that have shown that if you're more likely to be a victim of a violent crime during the summer, and it just has to do with this hot energy that it just fires people up in kind of a negative way if there's not enough to cool them down. So, fire on the positive end, though, is, it's our energy, it's our passion, it is our courage, our desire, our will. Without it, we are like lifeless almost, right? We're, like I said earlier, we're just like breathing and the heart's pumping, but there's no will there. So it also relates to our strength. And if we look at even that tarot card, the strength card, right? It's connected to the sun and connected to the element of fire. And one of the most beautiful parts about the fire element is that it's transformative. It can transform anything. And one of the greatest things and greatest gifts it can give us is it transforms our self-doubt into self-belief. And we will be talking more about that a little bit later. That's kind of the second part of the episode. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, I will talk about it later, is that fire is also connected to the physical sense of sight. Now, the sense of sight is the third sense. So what happens, and this happens in all creatures, and we can actually connect this to the chakras as well, is that the first sense is the sense of smell. So if you think about when an animal is born, if you've ever seen like the animals right after they've been born, the eyes are still closed. There's really not much going on, but that sense of smell is so heightened, right? Because they have to be able to smell, especially in a mammal. They have to be able to smell for the mother to know where the milk is going to be produced. And then the second sense is the sense of taste. And then they begin to lap up the milk and taste the food, right? And then the third sense third physical sense that begins is the sense of sight, and the eyes open. And even in animals that are born with the eyes open, like humans, the sense of sight is not developed in the beginning. So I will talk a little bit more about sight and how we can work with that sense in a very special way to develop our self-belief. But I just wanted to bring that up, that sense of sight being connected to the element of fire. Now, fire is the least dense of all of the elements. It is our spark, if you will. It is our fuel, like we talked about that internal fire. If you want to talk about a magical tool that's associated with fire, that would be the wand in most cases. Now, the wand helps us magnify and direct our energy, and all of us have a wand that's built in, as long as we have our fingers. In particular, the index finger can be used as a wand. Now, wands can be elaborate. You can buy them in stores. There's so many beautiful ones. You can make them. Here's one that I made. Our coven will often make wands, do like a wand making workshop. This one's really simple. It was just a nice stick that I had found. I have wrapped, a red cord here, and I drew some astrological symbols in it. This one is really cool too because it has this like little indentation here, which you could put a crystal there and wrap that. And so yeah, you could just make one on your own, find a really nice stick, and then put some time into it. The element of fire is also associated with the masculine versus the feminine. So it is a more masculine and projective energy. This doesn't mean men and women or a gender of any kind. It's just a way of kind of talking about how the energy is different than feminine energy, like water and earth. And it has the qualities of warm and dry. So usually it is associated with the element of the direction of south. Now that isn't always the case. It kind of depends on where the tradition that you study comes from, but in the United States, generally it's going to be the south, and it is associated with the season of summer, which makes a lot of sense. It's when the sun's at the height and peak of its energy. It's associated with the time of day of midday or noon, which again makes sense, right? Because that's when the sun is at the peak of its power. And it's associated with the signs of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and the planets that are assigned to those, which are the Mars, Sun, and Jupiter. And in fact, remember I mentioned earlier about the pointer finger, the index finger, being like an internal wand that you're born with, and this is called the Jupiter finger. So it's a way that we can, project out naturally. And colors associated with it are usually red or pink or fiery colors like orange and yellow. In the chakra system, the color that's associated with the solar plexus is yellow. Now, when we want to work with the fire element, we call this fire attunement. So anytime we want to work with an element, we want to attune our bodies to it. Now, in a previous episode, I've talked about balancing the elements, and I'll talk about that more. I think balance is really important. But tonight's episode, we're focused mostly on fire. So we're just going to be focusing on how would we attune to this one particular element, alone. So there's a bunch of different ways. So I mentioned earlier that the qualities of fire are hot or warm and dry. So what we can do is we can try to bring those qualities into our consciousness. So what does it mean to be hot or warm, right? What does it mean to be dry? And so one thing that you can do that's really wonderful is that you can light a candle and you can contemplate, right? So you could sit and meditate with that candle and really focus on the flame and really think about what does it feel like? What does the quality of warm feel like? What does the quality of dry feel like? So you can integrate that into your own consciousness. And you can also try to direct the flame. So if you've never done this before, it's a really interesting experiment. You can try with your own consciousness to make it more, make it burn brighter or higher, right? Or make it less, or make it move from one direction to another. So if you've never tried it before, I definitely recommend light a candle and sit with it and see what happens. See if you can connect to it with your own consciousness. Now, I'm going to come back in a moment to a very special technique called candle gazing. I want to get into that in more depth. But I did want to show you a couple of candles. Not that people don't know what candles are, but I talk about chime candles a lot because I think they're so good in spell work and magical practices, and sometimes people don't know what I'm talking about. So a chime candle is a very small candle. It's about this size, bigger than a birthday candle. And you can generally buy these at like a new age bookstore or an occult store, or online places like Amazon. You can find big boxes of these. In fact, I found one the other night. It was about 40 candles in a variety of colors for $9.99. It's a pretty good deal. So you can get them in a bunch of different colors, and that way whatever your intention is, you have these nice little candles, and they are designed to burn down in about 1 hour. So sometimes like bigger candles, you know, they serve a purpose. Sometimes we want to do big 7-day spells or even month-long spells where we want to use bigger candles. But sometimes these little ones really are quite charming. Now, if you're going to use them, you usually want to get some kind of holder that will hold them because they are a special size, right? So you can get little holders like this. You just look for chime candle holders, or this one's like a metal one. So here you can see it's just like a metal one and then it just fits in the base. But if all else fails, what you can do is here's a chime candle, and I took a bowl and I just poured a generous amount of salt in it, and then you can just place this candle in the bottom like that. And if it doesn't stay upright to the way you want, you can always light the bottom, like you can get the wax on the bottom a little hot and then put it into the salt, and then this will burn really nicely. Okay, so it's a little makeshift candle holder. And then of course, you know, there are other candles like these candles are really nice for the quarters. In fact, this is my coven's fire quarter candle. So you can get candles like this. I don't need to go into all the details of candles, but I just wanted to show a couple of options that we have, right? So besides working with fire, and I will get back into the candle gazing in a moment, a few other ways that we can attune to the element of fire is through taking decisive action. So if there's something that you need to do and you're having trouble doing it, you know, call in the element of fire and just make a decision and act on it. Don't think. So with the element of fire, there's no thinking and contemplating. That is a earth and a fire association, earth and water association, definitely not fire. So take action, don't look back. So that's one way to kind of work with the element of fire. Connecting and meditating with animals, connecting to and meditating with animals that are associated with fire. So we've got the lion and all the big cats. We've got dragons as like a magical animal. We've got lizards, foxes, rams. Those are the ones that kind of come to my mind. But, you know, communing with those types of animals will definitely draw in the element of fire. Working with deities of the sun or the element of fire, like Apollo. A lot of these tend to be masculine. We've got Apollo, we've got Helios and Ra, all these sun deities, Balder. Hephaestus was the deity, he was the god of the forge. He was married to Venus. We've got, actually Aphrodite. Well, we got Breed, Hestia, there's some feminine ones, and we have Lu. So there are all kinds of fire deities that you can work with if you want to bring in that element. And you can wear the colors of fire, red, orange, yellow. You can get stones and jewelry of those colors. Good stones are like garnet and ruby, carnelian, citrine. This covers all those three colors. Incense like cinnamon, basil, juniper, holly, oak, any incense or oils that are associated with fire. With oils, just be careful. Some of the oils that are associated with fire are not really good on the skin, especially cinnamon. You do not want to put cinnamon oil on your skin. I learned the hard way. So if you're going to work with those, you need to make sure they're in some kind of a carrier oil like almond oil or grapeseed oil or something like that. You can eat spicy foods. That's a really good way to bring the fire element in and attune to the element of fire. And you can do something spontaneous every day. Make an effort, especially if you're someone who knows that your fire is naturally low. Make that effort. It won't be easy, but hard. But you know, the work that changes and transforms us never is. Just make an effort, just one small spontaneous thing a day. Okay, so I'm going to get back into candle gazing now because it is a really beautiful practice, and I just wanted to spend a bit of time talking about how you can do it if you've never done it, and I'll have to give you some benefits to it. So candle gazing is called Trataka in Sanskrit. It is a really nice type of meditation, especially for someone who can't meditate. So I meet a lot of people, you know, who come through the group and various groups that I'm in or I run, and there'll be people who say, you know, I know that there's benefits to meditation, but I just can't do it. I just can't close my eyes and calm my mind. And I get it. I work with a lot of students. In fact, most of the students that I work with, for those who don't know, I'm in my day gig, I'm a teacher. And so most of the kids I work with have ADD, and it's really hard for them to meditate, I know. And so candle gazing is an interesting meditation that can work when other meditations haven't worked before. So in regular meditation, we tend to have the eyes closed. We need to be quiet. We still need to be quiet in candle gazing, but we don't need the eyes closed. The eyes are either fully open or the eyes are like half closed, perhaps, like almost like squinting. And what you do is you basically gaze at the candle flame until you see nothing else. So I'm just gonna give like an overview of it, and then I'm gonna talk to you how you would actually do like a session of this. So it improves concentration, it can improve memory. There have been some studies on this. They found that it calms the mind, just like other forms of meditation. It reduces anxiety and stress, and it may actually help with sleep disorders too, which was really interesting. Light itself affects the pineal gland. The pineal gland deep within the brain, as much science as we know right now, we don't actually quite understand fully what the pineal gland does. So we do know that it produces melatonin, and so there's this theory that maybe that's what helps with sleep. It's producing the melatonin that perhaps people have a deficiency in. But I also know that the pineal gland is connected to the third eye too. So there's something going on. It's going to strengthen our third eye as well. In turn could strengthen intuition. So there's just so much benefit to candle gazing, and there's also been studies that have shown that people who do it regularly might actually even strengthen the physical eyes, especially for people who are nearsighted. So if you're nearsighted, try it and see, because there has been some evidence that it can help with nearsightedness. So, okay, so let's say you're going to do a session of candle gazing. So I'm first going to pause by saying that, or start off by saying that people will tell you that you should be doing 10 minutes of this a day. And just like many of these practices, they're quite intense. 10 minutes for a beginner I think would be way too much. So I would start with a session of 1 to 2 minutes. If you are able to tolerate that, then you can bump it up 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and work up to that 10 minutes. You should not do it more than 10 minutes a day. And you really should do it for, a bit of time. So maybe you do it for a couple of weeks and then you take a break. And then a couple of weeks and you take another break. So let's say we're going to start a session of it. So what I like to do is, I don't actually like to blacken the room completely, though it's totally fine if you want to, but I like to dim the light. So I like to have like a little bit of light, or maybe keep on like a salt lamp. I really like that off in a corner, just so there's a little bit of ambiance. You can put on music, you can put on, incense, whatever it takes to get you into that kind of mood, right? And then what you want to do is you want to place the candle at eye level. So I like to sit on the ground. So putting like a little table in front of me with the candle on it is good, but you could sit at a table anywhere. You just want the candle to be about eye level, because you don't want to really be looking down or up. We want to just be gazing forward, right? So you want to be back about 2 to 4 feet from the candle. Okay, so we don't need to be right on it. We need to be about 2 to 4 feet away. And then what you do is you're just going to soften your gaze, and you're just going to stare directly at the center of the candle. And what many people experience is that after a bit of time, it begins to darken, it gets a little easier, and everything kind of around it fades away. And so here's the thing, is you can't really do it wrong. So you just do it. And at first, it may not seem like you're doing anything, but if you are gazing at that candle and you're doing that for a couple of minutes, you've done the practice, you've done it. Now, one of the things I should mention is that it can be a little bit harsh on the eyes, because when you're staring at it, of course you're going to naturally blink, but it's a bit drying, I found. And so some people find that their eyes start to water because of that drying aspect of the fire, right? Because remember, fire has that dry association. And so some people may also find it hard to keep the eyes open. So if you get into the practice, let's say you do it 30 seconds a minute, and you find that it's hard to keep the eyes open, close the eyes and just kind of reset for a few seconds, and then you open them back up, and then you start again. And I like to put like a timer on my watch or on my phone, and just set it for a couple of minutes and do your practice. And Another thing I'll mention is that after the practice, what you want to do is kind of stay in that darkened room for a bit. In fact, I like to put like an eye mask on, and you want to rest your eyes for a couple of minutes, maybe even up to 2 to 3 minutes, maybe even up to 5 if you want to. And definitely do not look at a bright screen right afterwards. And so you just want to, it's really good to do it like before bed, I think, and then you can just get into bed and close your eyes and rest. So I definitely recommend it if you've never done it before. It's a really cool practice, and it's really, really good at helping attune you to the element of fire. So I'm going to shift gears here. I'd like to talk a bit about self-belief, because the fire element, like I said before, allows us to transform anything. It can allow us to transform self-doubt into self-belief. Now, I've talked about self-doubt before. It exists within the collective unconscious of our species. Whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, we're all affected by it. And so some of us are, we're all affected by that kind of unconscious self-doubt, but some of us are affected by actual self-doubt that we know about, that's conscious, right? Because many of us have grown up around people who did not acknowledge or accept the gifts that we had. And they didn't understand how to help us. And for this very reason, we had to suppress our gifts, right? And from a very early age. And I talk to a lot of people who are adults now who are struggling. They know that they have they know that they have intuitive abilities. They know that they have, powers, abilities of magical abilities of many kinds, but they're just not quite sure how to utilize them, how to optimize them, because there is that nagging self-doubt that was kind of taught by others as we were growing up. And, in fact, I tell this story sometimes that when I was a little kid, like I could see energy, and I talked to my mom about this. I told her about it, and I didn't know to say, like, oh, I can see energy, but I could see this stuff right around me. And she thought there's something wrong with my eyes. So we went to the eye doctor in the little town we grew up in, and they didn't know what was going on. My eyes were fine physically. We went to a eye doctor in the next town over in the bigger town, and they didn't know what was going on. And eventually we ended up in Chicago at the best eye doctor there, and they still said nothing's wrong with this kid's eyes. And so I really do feel that this experience, right, taught me to dampen my abilities, very sadly. And I know that there are many of you out there who have not that same story, but a similar experience, and so for us, it's really important that we learn how to work through that self-doubt and those unconscious fears and doubts that were instilled in us when we were too young to even understand what was going on. So, so how are we going to combat this? Especially if we don't even know what this unconscious self-doubt is. How are we going to combat something that we don't even know is there, right? So one of the best ways to do it is simply working with the fire element. And we can do any of those practices. So anything I talked about earlier, any of those fire attunement practices, start doing one of those, and start working with the fire element. And just naturally, your self-belief, your self-doubt will be transformed through the element of fire into self-belief. Now, we can do a breath that's called the breath of fire. And I wanted to show that right now. It's sometimes called dragon's breath. And it's a really nice breath. It strengthens the Agni, or the fire element within us. Super easy to do. And there are also a few fire strengthening kriyas, or movements, that we can do. And I have a yoga class that I'm posting in the group tomorrow. And the whole first 15 minutes of it is a practice of some of these kriyas you can do. So, but let me show you breath of fire. It's really easy. And the only preface here is that if you're more than 3 months pregnant, it's just really not advised that you do this breath. It's just, you don't want to be pumping the belly, and we need to pump the belly for the breath. We don't want to pump it when we're that pregnant. So what you will do is you first think about what it would be like if we were going to fog up a mirror, right? Now put your hand on your belly and feel that pumping motion. That's the motion we need to feel, and we need the mouth closed. Okay? That's pretty simple. And you are just going to close your eyes for a moment. And we're gonna do this practice for about a minute together. Okay, and you're just gonna take one nice deep inhale and then let it out. I always like to take a breath in and out just to reset. Now we're gonna take the second breath in. We'll only take it about halfway, and then we're gonna begin. And you can start by fogging up the mirror and then close the mouth, okay? Once you get that feeling going. So it's like this. Now notice the speed I'm going there. If that's too much, you can slow that down. I like to put a smile on my face when I do it. You get the idea. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, so we can move on to the rest of the episode. But you can do that practice for a minute. I would start with a minute. You can work up to 3 or 5 minutes. It's really great to do in the beginning of your day when you first wake up. If you are someone who doesn't have trouble sleeping, you can do it at night. If you are someone who gets a little amped up at night, though, I wouldn't do it because, again, it's an activating energy. But really great for stimulating the fire element within us. And that one's called breath of fire, or sometimes called the dragon's breath. All right, so I wanted to talk about my full moon experience that I had this last full moon this Thursday night, because it ties into this idea of self-belief. It ties into the idea of the eyes, and it was just it was the most powerful ritual I've ever done, and I'm really excited to share it with you, especially because it ties into everything we've been talking about tonight. So in this ritual, let me back up for a second. So when we are doing ritual or magic or spell work or anything where we are changing a state of consciousness, it's not happening here in the 3D physical world. It's happening in the etheric plane. So some of you have probably heard me talk about this before. You know, this etheric plane is a place that we can get to when we come between the veils. So, you know, there's the veils of our world, and we can cross through those into kind of this space in between, and there's the veils into other worlds. These might be thought of as like crossing over when we die, or we transform, you know, into our next form, or dimensions and other you know, worlds that we're not aware of when we're in the 3D world. So when we come to this etheric plane, anybody can get there. We can all get there through, you know, casting a circle, setting aside sacred space. Like the casting of the circle itself is a very simple way to delineate or draw a space that separates like us from the outside 3D world and puts us into that etheric plane. And the problem with all of this, though, is that remember that whole idea of self-doubt, and remember how we all have it, even if we don't know it. It's in that collective unconscious. It's just kind of there in the ether, and it gets in our way. So even though we are witches, we've been doing this for a while, we cast that circle, we can say we believe there, but there can always be that nagging doubt behind us unconsciously, and for many of us actually consciously too. So we try our best, you know, we really, we want to believe in all of this, but, you know, we can't really help it. And in order for us to truly cross through into the etheric plane, we cannot rely on our physical senses. We have to rely on our etheric or our energetic senses. Okay, so now what I mean by this is that, you know, in that space, you know, we can have both the physical eyes operating and we can have the energetic eyes opening or operating. But those physical eyes, they have the potential to get in our way. So in the 8 limbs of yoga, there is a word that is called pratyahara. It's a really interesting idea, and anybody who's ever meditated has engaged in what is the outcome or the goal of pratyahara. It's sense withdrawal is what it translates to. So we close our eyes, and the reason we do this is so that we close outside stuff, and we use the inner eyes, okay? So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's actually like a whole passage that talks about how the physical senses are like, it's almost like a boat on water, right? And so every time that the physical senses, whether it's our eyes, our ears, mainly our eyes and our ears, but any time that they engage with an external object or vision or anything like that, it's like it rocks that boat. And for us to really be in that etheric space, we want that water to be nice and placid and calm. Okay, so this is why in yoga and in meditation, you're told to close your eyes, because you're trying to get into that space by stopping the physical eyes from hindering you by, seeing things around you, right? So these physical eyes, like I said, they can keep us from really engaging with the etheric plane. So here is what I did in my ritual. So I was thinking about this, and I've been working on these ideas of self-doubt myself and really trying to transform myself, optimize my own, psychic and magic abilities. And so I thought about, okay, I'm going to try this experiment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I could do the full ritual with my eyes closed. Now, I'm going to preface this with, I was out in public and there weren't people around me really because we were at the beach, but it was a public setting. And so I definitely, I'll talk about this more at the end. I don't want you to try this if you're in a public setting where it could be unsafe. So you can start at home or in your yard or something where you definitely know you're safe, or only try this when there's someone near you that you trust, okay? So what I did is I closed my eyes and I then proceeded through as much of the ritual as I could. And so this is casting the circle with my eyes closed. So I got up and cast the circle. Calling the quarters with my eyes closed, and really relying on my inner sight to guide me. And in fact, there's, a part of this ritual, I do the same ritual every full moon where I cut a space out of the circle and I then walk down towards the ocean, which is, 100 feet or so, or 50 feet, however far away I've cast the circle from it. And I offer something to the ocean. So I tried all of this with my eyes closed. Now, the walking part was a little harder. And so I did allow my eyes to just open very, 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 very small amount so that I could at least kind of see my feet and see a bit where I was going, but everything else around me was blocked out. And that was the goal. And it's much easier to realize that you're in the etheric plane when the eyes are closed. So it's not that we can't get into the etheric plane with the eyes open, but it's just easier to realize you're there when they're closed. And so this ritual was the most powerful ritual I've ever done. The energy I raised was crazy. I felt so close to the goddess and the god that I called. I feel my spell work was amplified. It was just overall, it was just an incredible, incredible experience that I would not have had, I don't think, had not closed the eyes. So I definitely recommend that you try this. Like I said before, though, make sure that you're going to be safe. So maybe try it at home first. And, so this isn't just closing the eyes during the meditation or a part of the ritual. It's like really try the whole way through and see what happens. And if you have to open the eyes here and there, it's okay, to check things out, to check your surroundings, and then close them again. And just try to stay with the eyes closed for the majority of that ritual and see what happens. Okay, and I'd love to hear if anybody tries it or has done it before. I would love to hear your experiences, because for me it was pretty eye-opening, because it was my etheric eyes that really opened and were engaged with the ritual. Okay, so I don't see any questions here. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any. So I'm just going to end here by mentioning a bit more about my upcoming membership I have coming. So some of you have heard about this. Some of you have gotten on the wait list already. If you've given me your name and you told me you're interested, you're on the list, okay? And I'll be unveiling this very shortly. So in this membership, the goal here is that we are going to get in, we're going to spend about 3 to 4 months or so working on some really intense shadow work. And I've got some really great things planned. We're going to be working with the different goddesses throughout this. We're going to work with Kali, and she helps us kind of burn away our fears and our doubts. We are going to work with Ariadne on unraveling our untruths. We're going to work with Anana and do a guided meditative descent into the underworld. Other goddesses that have kind of been coming to me is Caradwyn and her cauldron, and the Morrigan, Lilith. So we're just going to be working with kind of these dark deities at the dark moons and helping them. They'll be helping us guide our shadow work. And there will be also workshops like some that I have kind of thought about is, Chiron is the wounded healer. So we can find this kind of wound within our astrological chart, and it gives us an idea of where our healing really needs to take place. Once we can heal that one aspect of the chart, we then become better healers of ourselves and to others as well. And just really helps us bring our light more brightly to the world. We will do a workshop on kind of transforming negative self-talk into like a power mantra that we can use to just supercharge, our magical abilities. There is a class that I've taught my coven before. It's called Soul Theory and Pagans in the Afterlife. And I thought it would be a really cool workshop to do around Samhain. It just gets into like different philosophies that pagans have about, the soul, and what are the theories of the soul and where it comes from and where it goes to. And then I was also thinking about past life regression. So these are some of the thoughts. So the thing is, for anybody who's done shadow work, it's intense, right? So we can't do this can't just sit here and do this every single month. So at some point in the group, we're going to feel like it's time to take a break, and we're going to do a little bit lighter, bring in some more light, bring in some light work like chakra energy work, kundalini energy work, dream work. We can do, we can work lunar magic, elemental magic. So we kind of take a break from it, and then we go back to the shadow work. So it's really, it's going to be really exciting membership. It is very limited, this first round of it. I'm going to have a set number of people that we're going to take, and then once we've got those people, we're going to close the doors, and they're going to be closed, for the next 3 to 4 months, and then we will open them up again. But definitely, if you're interested, you want to get in the beginning. It's gonna be much cooler in the beginning for sure. If you get in the ground floor and you become one of the founding members of it. So if you have not already told me that you're interested, let me know for sure. I'll put you on the list, and then the next week or so, I'm going to be coming around and starting to tell people all the details, and then you'll get a chance to decide if it's time for you. If it seems like it's something you want to sign up for and join. Okay. So I am going to sign off here if there's no more questions. So again, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. If you tried any of the exercises or techniques or anything here gets you thinking about anything, please definitely reach out, let me know. And you can check out my yoga class that's going to be in the group tomorrow. It's got those fire enhancing kriyas you can try. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, blessed be.